Greetings, Guardsmen. Today we're going to look at how Space Marines fit into such huge armor, what are the differences between their internal organs and ours, and how it allows the Marines to stay awake 24 hours a day, eat fugu fish, and fight at the same time. Let's go back 10,000 years. Earth at this point is ravaged, isolated, torn away, cut off from the galaxy by relentless warp storms. It's impossible to get close to the planet. Plus, it has descended into a nuclear apocalypse, where tribes of techno-barbarians fight each other for supremacy and resources. While in hiding and waiting for the right moment, the Emperor reveals the secret of its existence, along with a ready-made army of his Thunder Warriors. Who are they? They are the prototype Astartes, genetically modified soldiers. The Emperor created them to unite terror during this crisis, and to test the technology to create future super soldiers. The second thing necessary for the Space Marines was the Primarch project, 20 genetically engineered transhuman sons of the Emperor of Mankind. All Primarchs, although they shared genes with their creator, but still differed from each other genetically. One had a wolf gene, another had increased resistance to poisons, and so on. The Primarchs were meant to be the military leaders of humanity's future army, but as it happened, the warp storm scattered them across the galaxy. However, the Emperor still had the genetic material of each individual Primarch, and together with the Thunder Warriors he had previously created, the technology to create super soldiers had already been perfected. This was roughly how the ultimate death machine, the Space Marines or Astartes, were eventually produced. They were very diverse. Their abilities depended on the Primarch's DNA, which was implanted into the warriors. The technology of creating super soldiers has been perfected. So, first of all, Space Marines are ordinary people who have undergone certain operations, implantation of entire organ systems and implants, as well as a program of training and special nutrition. In the time of the Emperor, both young and adult humans underwent such transformations. The stronger and more powerful a person was, the easier it was for him to undergo the transformation. The main thing was that it had to be a male. There were practically no problems and difficulties in the process. However, the Emperor was betrayed by one of the Primarchs, Horus. Horus wounded him badly, and the Emperor was hooked up to special life support systems. A civil war was raging in the Imperium. The war was so devastating that much of the technology regressed and much knowledge was lost. Humanity has taken a severe setback in development, including the technology to create Space Marines. A full understanding of the process of creating Astartes is gone. All that remained were instructions to do first this and then that. Therefore, now to create a new defender of humanity was suitable only for young men who have not entered puberty. And even with this condition, not all survived. Each order of the Space Marines had its own initiation rite. In most orders, the strongest boys were chosen at the age of 10. Once accepted into the order, the recruit became a neophyte. Depending on the order, the process of transformation of Astartes differed. We will discuss the most common scheme. The most important part of the transformation is the gene seed, which is a large term that includes several different systems. A gene seed is a kind of viral system containing the DNA code of the Primarch progenitor, which rebuilds the neophyte's organism, changes its structure and gives the organism new special properties such as those of the salamanders. They are characterized by onyx black-colored skin. Also, gene seed is an analog of stem cells, from which in the future will be created new organs for the new Space Marines. There are a total of 19 phases in the transformation, in each of which is a new implant. Let us now break down the phases in order. The first phase is the implantation of a second heart at 14 years of age. This process is not so difficult. According to the idea, the second heart increases blood supply to the body and intercepts the functions of blood pumping in case of damage or failure of the first heart. In addition, with the increase in size, in the future, the increased blood flow will be very useful. Phase 2. Implantation of the os modula, also called the iron heart. It is also carried out from the age of 10 years. It is a tubular organ of small size, necessary for the stimulation and growth of bones and muscle mass through the release of hormones. A change in diet also plays an important role. The food is saturated with various ceramite-based minerals which are more efficiently absorbed by the body thanks to osmodula. The third phase is usually carried out together with the second phase. A round organ, the biscopia, also called the forge of strength or the warrior's vigor, is implanted in the chest together with the osmodula. It also affects the hormonal system, increases the amount of growth hormone and at the same time takes over part of the hormonal control function, preparing the body for the insertion of future implants. For this reason, the second and third phases are most often carried out simultaneously. At the end of the first 3 phases, training begins in the formation of the neophyte. Over the next 2 years, his growth will increase to 220 centimeters with an equivalent amount of muscle and bone mass. And even after reaching this mark, the growth does not stop. The future Space Marine continues to grow, but extremely slowly, and will continue to increase during his life. An interesting point is why Astartes grow during life. Human bones stop growing because at the end of puberty, the growing tissue at the ends of the bones stops dividing and is replaced by bone tissue. This does not happen in Astartes, probably because of hormones. After about 2 years, at the age of 12, 14 years, the 4th phase of hemastomen implantation begins. This implant, also known as the blood maker, becomes an important part of the circulatory system and is implanted in the aorta or femoral artery. The hemastomen changes the chemical composition of the blood so that there is more hemoglobin in the blood. Consequently, oxygen and nutrients are better transported. Additionally, hemastomen begins to control the implants of the 3rd and 2nd phase, which causes growth to slow down to the necessary minimum. The 5th phase is Laraman's organ, also called the healer. It is similar to the liver but smaller in size, placed in the chest cavity and connected to the circulatory system. Its function is to increase blood clotting at the site of the wound. The effect is that this is much faster than in a normal person. The organ releases new synthetic cells into the blood, which are sent to the site of the wound and instantly scar it. That is, it effectively prevents major blood loss and infection of the wound. The infection simply does not have time to spread. Phase 6. Catalepsia node implanted at age 14. 17. It's implanted in the back of the brain. The function is as simple as possible. The implant is capable of alternately shutting down or redistributing brain functions, allowing certain parts of the brain to rest and putting the spaceman into a coma-like trance. This helps in some difficult times to avoid the need for sleep, but it does not replace full rest. It is still necessary. At the same time, under the circumstances, whether it is service on a combat post or a heavily prolonged battle, the Space Marines continue to effectively punish the Emperor's enemies. The next 3 phases are most often done at the same time, also at 14, 16 years of age. During the 7th phase, implants called Pomor or neutralizer improve the digestive system by adding one more gastric gland, which sanitizes but does not deprive the food of its beneficial properties. Pomor is able to isolate the rest of the digestive system when dangerous substances are ingested. Phase 8, the Omiphagia organ, also called the remembrancer, is implanted in the spinal cord and fuses with the central nervous system. It is designed to recognize DNA, RNA, and proteins. Thanks to it, a Space Marine is able to get additional information about the composition of the food. For example, even get the animal's memories by eating animal. The 9th phase is multi-lung, also called the imbiber, the 3rd lung enhancement. This allows you to use all 3 lungs to breathe harder and to collect oxygen in a depleted atmosphere. In addition, the multi-lung is able to block the normal lungs in a poisonous environment and begins to filter out dangerous chemicals in order to breathe freely. Next, phase 10, the oculobe implant attaches to the cerebral cortex. Oculobe, also called the Eye of Vengeance, improves vision. Through the nervous system, it connects to the retina. Light receptivity is altered. As a result, the Space Marine sees as well in the dark as he does in the daytime. In phase 11, Lyman's ear, also called the Sentinel, is implanted. It's simple. It gives you immunity to vertigo and the ability to withstand strong sound attacks. That is, it replaces not only the outer auricle, but also the inner middle ear. Phase 12 is an implantation of the Susan membrane. The organ is implanted near the pituitary gland as part of the endocrine system. This represents a kind of final lifeline for Astartes. Having been seriously injured when the rest of the organs are powerless to aid in recovery, the membrane puts the Space Marine into anabiosis. Metabolism is halted until the warrior can be properly assisted. There has been a case of staying in such anabiosis for 576 years. In this case, the Space Marine quietly returned to his usual lifestyle afterward. Phase 13, melanochrome. The implant is part of the endocrine system and is able to affect the skin through the lymphatic system, because it controls the amount of melanin in a Space Marine's skin. Once implanted, the skin can change its pigment cells, which protects it from certain levels of radiation and heat exposure. Roughly speaking, while normal people need to tan and protect themselves from the sun for a very long time, Astartes do it very quickly. During Phase 14, the Space Marine gains the oolithic kidney, also known as the purifier. This implant works in conjunction with a second heart to help filter the blood in the body while detoxifying it. In case of severe infection, it can completely eliminate toxins from the body, but it will still take some time. We are talking, of course, about extremely powerful poisons that immediately kill the average person. And during such detoxification, the Space Marine is still unconscious. In Phase 15, the neuroglottis implant, also called the devourer, is identified. It is very similar to the Omiphagia organ in its properties and is implanted in the oral cavity. The organ is extremely sensitive to the taste of food and determines the biochemical composition. Space Marine can literally track its victim by taste. Phase 16 is an implantation of the mucranoid, also called the weaver. This organ is directly related to the workings of the sweat glands. It changes the composition of sweat and only works as a result of environmental exposure. Besides the fact that the skin already changes its pigment due to the past phases and is very resistant to heat and cold, the new substance secreted instead of sweat additionally protects Astartes from extreme heat or frost. In the next phase, Phase 17, Space Marine gains some truly frightening abilities. Though this organ is not used very often, it's about the Becher's gland, which is implanted in either the lower lip or upper palate. It works in tandem with the salivary glands. The saliva turns into a poisonous acid that can even burn through some metals. Admittedly, not all orders have been able to retain this functionality, and some have more weakly acidic properties. And at the end, there remain two last, almost the most important phases: the revelation of progenoid glands and black carapace. Let's start with the latter, black carapace. It's a complex defense system that is hardwired to the Space Marine's nerve endings. Some kind of fibrous organic material is implanted under the skin of the chest and the entire torso. Once embedded, the material hardens and binds to the nerve endings. It is then embedded with neural sensors and interaction points that are cut into the surface of the carapace. All of this is necessary to connect directly to the Astartes power armor. Without this implant, it is not possible to connect the fighter to the Space Marine's power armor. There are models of power armor that work on a different principle, but they are weaker and designed for ordinary people. Not only does the black armor already protect the body well, but it's also a way to link the Marine's brain to his future armor in an informational way. All analytics about the condition of the armor will go directly to the brain of the wearer. And the last implant worth looking into is progenoid glands. These are special glands implanted in two copies, one in the neck, the second in the chest cavity. It is essentially a contribution to the future of the Order of Astartes. This organ contains and reproduces the very gene seed. Depending on the founder of the Primarch, the composition of the gene seed varies. Essentially, it contains DNA information that helps cultivate and create new implant organs for future Astartes. Without this organ and gene seed, it is impossible to create new fighters because the understanding of how it is done has been completely lost. The key is to keep the technology alive. There were cases that when the entire order was destroyed, the presence of a spare gene seed helped to revive it, or vice versa, Astartes, which remained extremely few, but with corrupted time remained the last members of their order. The important point is precisely in the Primarch whose DNA contains the gene seed. Depending on this, certain mutations may manifest as different phases pass. For example, salamanders in phase 13 have their skin take on a black onyx colouring and their eyes turn blood red. Space wolves, surprisingly, have a wolf-like genome. They have a heightened sense of smell and taste, as well as the potential to mutate into a werewolf-like creature called Wulfen. And there are many examples of this. It has even happened that the gene seed of some orders may have been intentionally or accidentally altered as an experiment. The first phases of bone growth stimulation was, for example, higher than the others. This eventually caused Marines to grow entire bone blades or additional bone growths. With all this variety, there are also quite standard Marines with a pure gene seed that lacks any mutations. The same Ultramarines whose gene seed is considered just about the purest. All of this combined makes the Space Marine the most dangerous weapon the Emperor has put on the assembly line.